Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Pivot, the podcast that takes you across high context cultures and low context cultures and their entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem. Today, we have with us Nankhonde Kasonde van den Broek, who is from Zambia, but truly citizen of the world. Welcome, Nankhonde, to Beyond the Pivot.
Thank you, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I started today with mentioning high context cultures and low context cultures, which I didn't know what is the difference until a couple of days ago when I was researching what you do for work and about your life. So could you please tell us a bit more about what is the difference between those two?
Great. Okay. So I am a coach by training and I'm an organizational coach. And in the space I'm in, we support leaders in organizations at any level to really fulfill their potential to contribute to the business by getting the competencies that are important and success has shown when applied, when learned and applied, deliver results. So in doing this in Zambia, in an African context, I started to realize that there are differences between my training, which is Western, and my place of practice, which is the global South. And some of the differences in my ability to apply the models I've learned for transformation and people development required me to start paying attention to my context. And I started to appreciate that there was something happening in my coaching spaces. I started to realize that I was often supporting transformation in people through coaching conversations that had participants that were not visible. And these participants were the culture. So in answering a question, you could almost feel and see somebody else influencing the response and the feedback. And I then realized that what are those influences? What is happening here? And what are the differences that I have to pay attention to when applying my Western training? I then realized that some of these differences coming from the culture are about cultural and contextual differences. And that then took me down a journey of curiosity to understand that when you're working with people and you're working with organizations, you have to be conscious of the context that you're actually and the environment that you're working in. And from a coaching perspective, I understood that high context cultures are cultures where the relationship and dynamics of communication are different to low context cultures. Now, high context cultures are traditionally found in emerging markets and global south, if you want to call that, but also very prominent in the Middle East and Asia and even Latin America. And basically, high context cultures describes a group of people who have an established way of showing up or being in their identity drawn from their culture and highly influenced by traditions, norms, and practices that influence what relationship means and how they communicate. And as such, they have indirect cues. When you're speaking, a lot of the context is brought into understanding the meaning. Whereas low context cultures, which tends to be the northern hemisphere or the Western world, is quite direct in its communication. And when something is said, it's exactly what it's meant. And so I realized that if I'm going to be supporting transformation and helping people become better leaders and better and support their personal growth, I need to understand how they communicate and how they relate with others, because that has an impact on how they will feel authentically and secure when they're working in teams and organizations. And so high context cultures and low context cultures, from a psychology perspective and behavioral science perspective, just describes the differences between different groups of peoples and how they relate and communicate.
Interesting. Now I can see like what happened to me yesterday was that I put apartment for the market in Czech Republic to rent. And I know I consciously put that a like higher price because I thought people will negotiate it down.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody negotiates it down because they have a low context culture, and they're like, just take it as it is, you know. But
That's the price, right?
exactly. And now I have to actually do it But and now it makes so much sense based on what you said, because I feel like if I put it to rent for my Mexican friends, they would try to like negotiate, lowball me, and like we will achieve some kind of happy middle in the end.
Yeah.
So very
So you're
interesting that.
describing the differences in
Yeah,
across the world and why we need to pay attention to them because they affect business.
yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that most of the coaching teaching is from the Western perspective, from the low context culture perspective. So, is there any school of thought for the high context cultures?
Interesting. So, what is widely documented, commercialized, and accessible are the Western models. And this has been great grounding for even myself in terms of my own training. But what is inherent and innate in cultural systems and knowledge systems in high context cultures are the methods. Now,
Mm-hmm.
they are passed on through different approaches, but they exist. And so, what we're saying is that with high context and low context cultures, most of the training materials have been developed by Western theorists and authors. And as such, they've given us a worldview and a lens, but they've spoken to universal principles and practices. And these have been documented and captured into textbooks that we go to school to learn. But
Mm-hmm.
knowledge systems and knowledge transfer is something that happens in high context cultures, formally and informally through traditional systems, through formal systems, through textbooks. But in our field and the thought leadership around management, people development has been more widely documented, communicated, and theories applied from a Western perspective. And that's the challenge. How do we bring in the Ubuntu philosophies into thought leadership, robust models? How do we explain some of the norms, practices, and traditions that over time come from cultural systems? And so for us, what we're saying is that it's not that they've never existed, it's just that the way they're communicated, how they're documented, and where they reach is different.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you get to this point in your life, and you are trying to kind of solve this puzzle of people working together from different cultures? Like, what was the journey that led you down this very interesting spiral?
Interesting. You know, today I'm an entrepreneur and I love what I do. I would not go back. But I wouldn't say I had planned this path, right? I actually started out my career working for international organizations and I was on a trajectory. I loved it. It gave me exposure to the rest of the world. It gave me an opportunity to also understand development, national development, economic development, social development at a very systems level, broad scale, and global level. And I enjoyed working on programs that support countries to develop when I was working for the United Nations. And I was on a trajectory and a career and course. And through that experience, um, I felt that it was very interesting because I was exposed to different cultures. Very often in some of these meetings, you have five nationalities around the table and possibly three languages that are not native to the conversation that the meeting is being held in around the table. And so from the beginning, I was always immersed very early on in my career. And my father being a former also international civil servant and a Zambian civil servant initially, I was always exposed to these places where I had to interact with people who were coming from different worldviews, different experiences, and even took that into my initial professional career. So for 10 years, I was running international programs and supporting development in different ways. And then I got married and I have a wonderful husband and children. And I needed to pivot because my family values and my professional ambition were in tension and conflict. And I had to choose, I had to decide, what do I do here? And so I chose to follow the path of starting to support our family and start our family and follow my husband's career. And in that process, I then realized that I was struggling with that decision, although it made sense from a values perspective. It actually questioned my own identity because until then, my professional identity was who I was. I was my CV, I was my role. And I had to go through coaching, and coaching helped me understand the competencies I have that are transferable into something else. That the hat and career and title are just trimmings, are labels that can be taken away anytime, but the value is still there. And it was through that coaching process that I realized, okay, my academic background is management. I love working with people. I love organizational systems and how getting things done. And so through the coaching, I thought, let me use some of the tools I've learned to help other people. And let me do it in a way where I can manage my time so I can try and balance the family, but also still sustain my own purpose and what I'm passionate about, and also have a career out of it. And so initially, I did the coach training, started working with individuals, and it was through that I realized that coaching is a profession. I can actually do this formally and beyond just supporting the rise of individuals in organizations, because even with the UN, I rose very fast into levels of responsibility and exposure that I wasn't prepared for. And as such, I then thought, why don't I help other people do this? I had a lot of pain when I was rising into these roles. I jumped with my ambition into opportunities, but I didn't have the strategic leadership competencies that really would have made my experience less painful. And so combining the coaching experience, combining my understanding of organizations and my personal pain coming from how I rose without having the complementary competencies, I thought, what does this look like? What does this do? And let me just start. I've got coaching skills, coaching training, and I've got a space I understand, management and organizations. And there I started working with my first client. And that was over 13 years ago, 14 years ago, and built from scratch a coaching business that now serves multiple countries on the African continent. And it was through that experience that I realized that we go through cycles in life and we go through different experiences. And whatever happens, when I get into a challenge or a crisis where I have to make a decision, I become creative. So I started to think about what coaching did for me to help me think about what opportunities do I have here? What can I do with what I have? And that's how I started now creating my own path and my own business and became an entrepreneur. And then determined, okay, I've got the passion, I've got the training. Now I need to understand the business of coaching. So there's the coach, but there's the business of coaching. And that's what now, over the last decade, I have built and studied the business of coaching. How do you develop a business? How do you build a team? How do you understand the financial side of the business? All these things I've had to learn. And so my path into what I'm doing today was not straightforward. It was an intersection in my own life that led me to answer the question, who am I? What am I good at? What can I do? And what can I start with?
I love how you ended this because I hired a coach for myself to exactly figure that out after 10 years in my career. Like, what am I good at?
Yes.
What should I do? And so on. So it's a spot on. I see that in the beginning you mentioned you had this experience in a family in the international diplomacy, let's say, serving culture and so on. What brought you that? And you were a very entrepreneurial employee, in the UN because you said you were jumping on opportunities, not letting anything slide and so on. And so I suppose there had to be a little shock in. And there had to be some challenges between like transitioning from the entrepreneur employee to the entrepreneur, like you mentioned. You had to learn the business. But what would you say was the one thing that you remember like until today that perhaps was a little more challenging, or maybe like a mistake you did, so our audience can learn from it or be ready for it when it happens with their first client, or getting their first client?
Oof. It's interesting. I was recently in a founders session, and she summed it up in a very interesting way, because the conversation title was like your first client, your first hire, and your first failure. As an entrepreneur, we're all going to go through them, and I think on entrepreneurship, I never really understood is twofold. One side is you can learn the theory and you can learn, the stages of business development. You can understand how to, and I went through several accelerators over the years. I'm always in an accelerator. I'm about to exit one. I think I'm on my fourth, and I'm looking for my fifth one. What I realized is these entrepreneur incubators help you on two fronts. They help you in terms of your mindset. An entrepreneurial mindset is important to nurture it and build it, but to also cultivate it if you already are predispositioned with it. Because the mindset is what is going to help you maximize the skill set you acquire through trainings and courses. Because the first thing I learned is my mindset is important. What I believe, what I say to myself. Because what I'm building, I'm a pioneer in this space. So what we've gone on to do is through the coaching experience, Zanga African Metrics is a HR tech company that develops leadership assessments and analytics for HR practitioners and coaches to use to help them measure the competencies that individuals have so that they can help them grow. And so we've built the digital tools to help you answer the questionnaire that then gives you a profile report showcasing your strengths and your areas for development. So I've gone on to move from the coaching in person, supporting one person, to understanding that it's very difficult to scale if you are the main product and you have to be everywhere. So I've then pivoted into technology to help scale and reach more people and have wider impact. So the first thing I understood about entering entrepreneurship is my mindset. Who has done this? Mm-hmm. And few people have done it in that I can look around me and drive down the road and find them. But when I go online, there are several Western companies that have done that. So the first mindset was to say, you have to be convinced that what you are doing adds value. And you've got to be clear about the problem it's solving. So my understanding, first of all, and over the years, continues to be refined to answer the question, what is the problem I'm solving? Because as long as I'm clear about the problem I'm solving, I need to make sure that others understand it, because my understanding is not others. My mindset has to persevere. I need to be resilient to keep going and answering the questions that the business presents to me. So for me, mindset was number one. You are going to be confronted with so many things that the answers are not clear. I'm reading Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, in entrepreneurship. And I think the mindset is critical because there are things in the entrepreneurial journey that I've encountered that there is no recipe for. So I need to, where there is no playbook, which was the difference with working in an organization that is established, I need to develop the playbook. Where there is no structure of how to price it or make it profitable, I need to think about the unit economics. I need financial literacy and information. So the entrepreneurial mindset is, first of all, resilience, but also curiosity to get the information and find it that is going to help you. Because if you get confronted by challenges and you feel defeated, you're not going to go very far and you're not going to sleep. Already, entrepreneurship doesn't accord you much sleep, but now you will sleep less. So your mindset is important. What you say to yourself is important, and believe in yourself. The second area is then the skill set. Go to the places where you can learn what you need to know. There is a formula. There are skills. There is knowledge on how to run a business, but there isn't a formula on how to run your business. So you need to now bring the application. So the first mistake I made was underestimating how much I need to believe in myself. And going in how much I need to draw on my resilience and ability to solve problems. And also my ability to know that when I don't know something, I need to say it and find the people who know it. Because you cannot have ego in entrepreneurship. I have no problem going to beg and ask for help and say, come, I need some help in this. So your mindset helps you. Then on the skill set, don't just get the tools and the knowledge, apply it. Every accelerator I've been in, I go in, where am I in terms of the stage of the business? Am I at the idea stage? What I'm learning, how does that apply? Or am I at what we've done recently, which is our first raise? What do I need to know? How do I apply it? How do you build a deal room? A data room? You know, the accelerators, the knowledge they were passing, the skills they were implementing to me, I was able to apply it. So your mindset is one area that I would say I learned a lot about. I feel I'm much more resilient. And then the skill set, how to actually run a business and the skills you need. A founder is a visionary. A CEO executes a strategy. The skill set and competencies you need to take the strategy into something viable that can be cascaded and executed is something I'm continuing to learn, even if it's what I actually do as a coach for others. It's easier to point out and guide somebody else, but now I am in the seat. I am the founder who had a vision and is now a CEO who has to execute a strategy to build a profitable African business.
So many questions now. So first question I would say is, uh, you have to be coaching in your job and with your business now. A lot of CEOs, perhaps who started as founders as well. So do you see that being a difficult transition for them, or are they balancing just like you do, because you have to in the beginning, both roles at the same time? For me, it's easy to be visionary. It's hard to have a process for me. So I'm curious about what is your advice for people like that, or perhaps if you see them in real world as well, in the boardrooms of the giant banks and public offices as well.
Interesting, because I would say there's a difference. If you're a founder in a business that you started, what made you successful to get the idea into something tangible that solves a problem you can communicate and actually has traction is that somebody actually wants to pay for it. And pay for it sustainably, as in continue to pay for it and not one off, is a particular predisposition, right? It's a way, and your energy, your thinking, and your focus is channeled. But when you get into an established business that then has to execute on volumes based on value and bottom line, what I find is that in established businesses, there's so much scaffolding, there's so much holding you up. When you need this information, there's a department or a person to go to. In those structures and systems, it's almost like the processes are already built, have been tried and tested, and you're coming in to plug and play. So whilst there is a sense of entrepreneurial kind of mindset in CEOs, if you think about the scaffolding they have to support them to deliver and execute versus a startup or small medium enterprise, that scaffolding doesn't always exist. And so as a result, your problem solving capabilities, the challenges you have to face are experienced differently. And so I wouldn't necessarily classify them the same, because I think that how people rise in organizations, established organizations, into senior leadership roles where they eventually carry the title CEO is very different from how people move from nothing into to leading an organization that then requires them to deliver the same profitability and results when it comes to measuring the success of a business. And so I say this because I think that the founder becomes the CEO overnight. The professional rises into the role of the CEO over a period, because then you've gone through graduate entry, maybe middle management level entry, then you went into senior management, then you became the CEO. The founder had an idea that has now got traction, and suddenly the CEO has to execute to sustain it. I hope that makes sense.
And also makes sense since you sometimes see in the news that, like, the founder of some big startup had to be replaced and a CEO came in. So I feel like now, based on what you are saying, that it makes sense because they require a different skill set, essentially. You don't need a visionary anymore. You need to satisfy the shareholders now.
Yes.
So, thank you for the explanation. So I don't have to be worried too much about myself now. You coached me during this podcast.
Interesting, because as CEO of Zanga, I also know that at a point I'm going to be a problem. My competencies to drive the scale and our ambition may not be sufficient. I may not be future fit, but I understand where I need to take the business. And you've still got to learn what you need to. And I think one of the things we did at Zanga is that understanding not just the hard skills and the soft skills of leadership, putting that into an assessment, but then applying the contextual aspects of the African environment. What happens in relationships and the dynamics of the context, and how does the culture come into how you make sense and make decisions in the business? So we created a model of developing leaders that speaks to the culture and the context, especially in leadership competency frameworks and models where, today, your currency volatility, energy crisis, there's differences not just only in established organizations, but also in developed countries versus emerging markets, where you have all these other contextual and cultural elements that actually come into what is your normal day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's something you cannot even plug in the CEO from the south to north, from north to south, because they are used to different everyday problems.
You
So
can plug them in, but you must prepare them.
gotcha. It makes
And
sense.
this is the work we do as coaches,
Yeah,
is to,
yeah.
when they come in, they realize, I had planned these results I would get. I have a team. Why am I not seeing the results? I'm like, okay, welcome to your context. The context is the coach. Let's help you understand how to navigate the environment and how to be successful in this environment whilst still being a leader based
Mm-hmm.
on universal principles of leadership and management.
Makes sense. So you mentioned Zanga assessment test in your last reply to my question. So could you tell me a little bit about it? Like, what do I get as a assessment if I fill it in? Because I know Clifton Strengths assessment. I did it myself, so it's a little bit about me, by Gallup. Cool. I still don't know how to apply it to my life, but
Right.
so there is assessment you do, and I'm curious, like, what is the implication of it, and how does it look like in the end? What do I find out about myself or my organization?
Great. So the Zyker assessment is a work style assessment. Our psychometrics have been used in organizations for a long time, and there are different tools, Clifton Strengths, that you talk about that basically speak to why psychometrics are brought into organizations. They're trying to predict behavior, to understand upfront what it is by measure. A psychometric is a measure of the mind, trying to understand what is in the mind. What are the competencies or traits? Because there's behavioral assessments and cognitive assessments that they measure different things. We have work styles assessment that is a combination of a behavioral assessment, and some cognitive elements. But what it's trying to understand is that given a particular situation, it's measuring what will this person do and what should they ideally do when they're in a situation where they need to develop a strategic plan, they need to develop a team. Management and leadership best practice has taught us what makes successful leaders. What are the tools, when applied effectively, allow you to manage well? So we understand that. And as a result, there's a profile of an effective manager and an effective leader. So what assessments are trying to do is the individual now answers a set of questions that are predetermined and designed to understand, according to those best practices, we want to support you to be effective in your role. What strengths do you have according to the competencies that are important? And competencies are observable behaviors, knowledge, aptitude, and skills that you apply to get a result. So what do you do well? And what do you have? And then where are your gaps? What don't you have? So our assessment is basically a questionnaire that measures what's in your mind when it comes to your ability to be an effective manager or leader. And the report then tells you your strengths, just like the report you saw. And then it gives you your gaps and what you need to do to develop in these areas to now move to the next level. And that's why we call it the leadership journey. It's on a journey of development so that you can move on to take on increasing responsibilities and scope and demands in terms of the work and results that you can actually be deployed into or rise into. So our assessment basically measures how you are doing well and where your gaps are when it comes to managing and leading, so that we can help you, so that we can help the founder become an effective CEO, and training and learning modules can then be aligned to your needs and not just generally sent into a classroom to learn management or leadership. You'll understand where your gaps
Yeah.
are so that you can focus on those.
So you pretty much get like a benchmark in the beginning, then you can grow based on the benchmark.
Yes.
And yeah, and the since we talked so much about the culture and how much it influences how good of a leader you are, because you need to influence the other people. Does this culture also come into the context, into the assessment, in a sense that perhaps the assessment test is different for somebody who wants to be a leader in Zambia compared to Czech Republic? So I'm wondering if there is like a difference in questions or maybe different outcomes, or how does that work?
So the way we design the assessment is very interesting. When you're designing assessment instruments, there is a rigor and a process for ensuring their credibility. And in the beginning, I knew that my background is management. I trained in organizational coaching, but I'm not a behavioral scientist. And one of the things I think that, again, goes back to that entrepreneurial mindset is I knew that I needed to find the people who have the knowledge that I need to do this right. And I had already been working with them because as a coach, you're working with organizations and you're supporting leaders to develop, and there are other instruments and tools being applied. And in fact, I am certified and trained in other tools. But none of the tools could help me close the gap when it came to the context and the culture. And that's why I decided, where is this tool? Why hasn't anybody built it? And my entrepreneurial mindset says, well, if nobody has done it, then you do it. Introduce it. Open the door so that even others can come in future and build even better tools. Let's do it. Let's open the door. But the way we designed it and the international team that was brought together was deliberately chosen. I knew that I needed industrial psychologists or who basically psychologists who work in the context of organizations and understand behavior in organizations. I needed to build a team that was credible and international. I needed to lean on their expertise, but also their reputations in the design. But I also knew that it had to be mixed. So it had to be a combination of people from the West and people from the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, from the high context and low context cultures, because we have done and are doing something new. In 2020, Association for Business Psychology in the UK actually shortlisted us as finalists in their awards because of the disruption we're bringing, to bring this lens of changing what we are accepting in the market as tools and now giving it relevance by bringing in the cultural elements. But we deliberately designed it so that it allows you to use it in both high context and low context. There are 5 cultural dimensions that are measured with the competencies of leadership and management, and they're intertwined into the questions. So you don't know where they come through, but there are questions that are specifically asking about 5 areas of culture. And we're not the first to do this interrogation. IBM did a lot of work around this with Gert Hofstede in his model. When they were entering new markets, again, they knew there was opportunity, but there was something else that was coming in that was influencing their ability to achieve results. So the famous study is how they understood what aspects or dimensions do you need to take into consideration to be successful in different markets. Maya has the culture map. You have Philip Brzezinski, who's also done work and has another cultural tool. So they're different sort of behavioral scientists who have done work in this space to understand that you have to pay attention to how culture shows up and influences decision making. And so the tool we developed was then, it can't just be an African tool. It is actually describing from a scientific and theoretical foundations differences in culture and contextual behaviors and how they influence the ultimate result. So our tool has 5 cultural dimensions. It looks at beliefs and value system. It looks at beliefs, traditional, spiritual, and religious beliefs. How do these influence how somebody makes sense of a decision they have to make? What filters are they using in everything they are confronted with? And what filters come from their faith? And you know that is strong in high context cultures. Second, the sense of community. This whole, the sense of being and value of Ubuntu, the sense of collective versus individual. The North is more individualistic because it is about how I can get things done, how I can reach a certain level. And I guess, that's great. That's a promotion. But then look, high context cultures have a value around community. There's something around family, and there's something about the collective. So we then added the dimension of what is the sense of individual versus collective in this environment? Because the more propensity you have towards individualism operating in a high context culture, you have to understand that the relationship between standing out and shining alone is seen differently in the West. In America, I can walk into a meeting, I can showcase, I can show who I am. If you come to certain other contexts and cultures, you come in and your ego, it's interpreted and read differently when you shine like that. And so we wanted to make sure that you understand those nuances and those dynamics. The same person in even the same type of meeting, but in a different context, how the room reads them and accepts them. So that is collective in terms of community. The second dimension. The third dimension is looking at loyalty, pre-existing relationships. What is it that exists in high context cultures where when working with people and organizations, your relationship to the person matters, where you know them from. I know you because we come from the same place. I know you because we grew up together, or we know your parents, or we went to school together, or we worked together, or we're from the same tribe. These things actually influence. And so you've got to pay attention to what are those dynamics that are creating different levels of loyalty for a specific group of people, and why are you not accorded that same sort of favor or merit? There are pre-existing ties in those relationships. And then respect is, again, how we treat age, tradition, and culture, how that shows up. And then pride, our sense of achievement, social status. So we layered in those 5 dimensions into how managers and leaders make sense of the situations they meet in the organization and how those filters affect what they do. So, for example, I myself, as working with people of very different faiths, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, you name it. Because in organizations, it's not about the faith, it's about the skills and the training and qualifications to deliver a result. So we're used to working with different faiths and denominations. But what you see is that the different filters around how people make decisions are influenced by what they believe in. And so as a Christian going into certain meetings, I would find that there's some principles or morals or ways of doing things about how to live with people that come from my faith that I bring into how I'm managing the team. And then I have to think about the organization has its own values also. So whose values am I pushing? Am I pushing you towards my Christian values? Or am I looking at the context of the building I'm in, the organization, its values, and which hat am I wearing? So it's something I've had to learn myself to not neglect or remove my own values, but understand how do I create space for them and still deliver and align with what the organization is asking me to do. That's what we've done. Layered in those filters into the questions you should be asking in a high context culture.
It's very interesting because I can also see that one of those filters, or when you put the filters up, it also matters, who you send to the meeting. If you to some cultures it could be female, male, could be a difference, right?
Yes.
So that had to be also kind of hard as a female entrepreneur to like go to certain meetings and knew that, especially from your background, knowing how they're going to perceive you and then deal with it based on your values and what you bring to them.
This is so funny. I remembered even in my professional role in one of the UN meetings, I was the grant manager, basically the person who was going to chair the meeting. And I was in the room, but I was socializing and walking around. And very interestingly, I had somebody say, we'll start the meeting when the chair arrives. And when I went to sit in the chair, I got this look. And it was at the beginning of my career as well. And you could see, you could read the room. You don't fit the profile of the person who should be carrying this portfolio, and has to make the decisions and is going to lead this meeting. And so these are things you confront, and you have to roll with them, but understand them and how to work them to still get your results. So I do certain things when I go into meetings. There's a way that I respect what may be happening in reading the room, but then I conduct the meeting in a way that I ensure I get my result. And so you've got to speak to the culture. I remember being posted to Senegal, and my first week in the office, I'm coming in from Geneva, posting there, and going into meetings. And after my second week of meetings, one of the assistants in the office called me inside and said, there's a difference here. When you're not going to last very long around here because of the way you come into the meeting, you go straight into the agenda, you say, hello, hello, you don't even wait for the answer. And she said, you know, you're an African. You remember the meeting by greeting people. Take time to know how people are. And she reminded me what I used to do, but I had moved because I'd moved to a low context culture. You greet, yes, hi, how was the weekend? Great, now let's go into the agenda. Tried to do that in the meeting in Senegal, and I didn't have the room with me because it's almost like I'd violated something that I didn't even know. And so that's what we've done. When you understand what you need to engage with and what the environment presents, that is the context. Then you can work with it. You can still allow it to be honored, but you still get the results you need.
I see that being a big opportunity as you described, because a lot of now EU funding, let's say, is funding for like EU African consortiums to bring
Yes.
innovation together and so on. So we're like merging those two words and how to work together and achieve those results. Yeah, it's a big market to be. So yeah, now I see where the business is and what you're doing.
Great. We now have over 1,000 employees that have done it across 130 organizations, completed our assessment tools in 25 countries and 30 industries.
And what are the companies like? Are they more like the corporate world or the public, perhaps offices? Like who does the assessment test mostly?
Wherever there are people who need to support teams and drive results, we are there. They're both public sector, private sector, government.
So is there any like commonalities between them that you see? Usually based on our data, they don't understand they have to meet and greet everybody before they start.
So, the nature of the private sector is result oriented and results driven. And whilst the public sector still produces a result, it's a result in a different way. It's a social impact. So what you have in the private sector is the urgency. What you have in the public sector is a different way that urgency is expressed. And as a result, what we've seen is that because we're going into organizations to support people to be effective in their roles and understand their environment. So we are working with people to understand who they are and be effective where they are. What we see is that in the private sector, because of the demand of shareholder returns, the targets and the accountability is more results oriented and driven, and also the ways that is measured is more stringent and strict. There is a different way that change needs to come in and change needs to happen, and the decision to make those changes. But in the public sector, what we find is that there's still results to be achieved. There's a social impact, whether it's saving lives, for making people's life easier by providing services. We find that there's a different mindset around how to manage the urgency. And when it comes to actually accountability on the time it takes, the implementation of results can extend and stretch. And so you can find there's extensions of programs and there's another phase happening. And so whilst there's still a form of accountability because there's a desired outcome, how you achieve it and how long it takes to achieve it is different. But when it comes to results, both are looking for results, but how they achieve them is different. And then you'll find in the public sector, there's a more traditional ranking and hierarchy in the system that also affects and is influenced by the culture. So there's a way where when the decision needs to be made, it can only be made clearly at a certain level of authority. When there's an idea and contribution, there's a way it has to come in so that it doesn't create instability. In the private sector, if you've got an answer to a problem, whoever has it, bring it. And then, it can get executed and acted on. But there's an order, there's a structure, and there's a way you conduct yourself in the public sector. That then means the way to get to results is different.
Mm-hmm. I see, especially with the time lapse for the public sector will be in Czech Republic 4 years, the election cycle, right? So they have to bring results every 4 years so they get re-elected or showcase that they are worth our vote for them. And how was the journey of fundraising? You said you mentioned you just did your first fundraising round. And again, going from entrepreneurial employee to consultant where you sell your time for money, now building a product and raising money for it is like 3 different disciplines, essentially. So
Yes.
I'm curious, how was that second transition now?
Oof. This only happened in November last year. I'm still learning I'm on the journey, actively, live. And I would say it's very interesting. So kind of you solve one problem and you create another one. One of the wonderful opportunities is to be invested in and be investment ready. And a lot of the accelerators I was working through, and I went through Bongo Hive, I went through the Women's Capital Accelerator. The Women's Capital is actually the fund that invested in us. I'm currently in the IFC Accelerator for female founders. I went through the AGS Accelerator. At every point of attending the accelerators, I was at a different stage of the business. So Bongo Hive introduced me to the business model canvas, and it helped me understand the canvas and everything I had to understand about my customer, my product, my market. When I moved into the next stage of the business, was like, okay, now we've got this in place. We have our MVP. We went to market. Then I moved into the AGS Accelerator. How do we now go to market and our pricing and financial model? So different things started coming up that were needed. Then we're in the market. We have traction. We even went into Kenya before we were ready. We actually had our first client 1 year post MVP in another country, and we're still learning our anchor market. And so going into that accelerator, I also then had to think about, okay, systems and structures. Up until now, we were a startup, and now we're going into a scaling, which is the beginning of an organization, which is why I say the blueprint of an organization is not totally far from the founder and the CEO journey's experience. Because if you're going to scale and be successful, ultimately, you're going to build and see your organization. It doesn't exist yet, but you start now having to look at systems. You start not have to look at procedures and processes, workflows, understanding, your unit economics, your cost of sales, and your pricing structure, your pricing model. Never mind the price of the product, the pricing model behind the product. And so I went through these journeys and different accelerators that got me through to the point where now I had the foundations of these in place. And I always say, I don't think product market fit. Do you ever really achieve it? I don't know when, because I find the more you dedicate, the more you listen and to the feedback and incorporate it, the more you continue to refine and understand what's working. And so even now I'm finding we're tweaking and sort of leaning into what's working. But what happened last year was that we had the products, we had our MVPs, we had traction, we had our pricing models and structures. We had now a team that I hired. And we had now from the teams and just people around the table delivering the products and services, we now had functions. We now have business units. And then we needed systems to manage the processes and start bringing in SLAs and start bringing in competencies to support the team to now grow into the roles that the business has evolved into what it needs. And so we started working around the people we had. Now we're working around what the business needs. In that process, we started to understand that the revenue that we were generating has cycles, and cash flow is a challenge. And so whilst I knew that we were going to get to the targets, we would actually get there faster if we had an investment that helped me deliver some strategic initiatives and projects that would help me improve how I package the product, the channels I used to get the product to the customer, and how I delivered the services, as well as then the opportunity to upsell and resell to the same customers because of the efficiency of that. For me, the investment was about how to complement and accelerate my ability to meet my targets. But I had to be in a position to answer the question, am I building a business that I feel that is going to be sustainable and will get there anyway? That is a question you really have to answer yourself, because money and investment is not the answer. You already have to have that idea in your mind about your business. Then the money comes in to accelerate your ability to get to those targets. So the foundations must be in place. That was very important to me. So when we got the investment in, it was about accelerating us. I still have challenges in getting cash flow management, onboarding, attracting new clients, supporting effective service delivery. We're solving those problems. But the investment has come in to help us, one, build our own platform. We started with a third-party platform. We're now working on building our own platform. Second, we have a contact center. We're able to actually provide support and services much faster than we can with the team, 2 people on a phone. We now have a system. Third, what we've been able to do is work on our branding and visibility. You can see even our LinkedIn page, where we've initially got the most sort of effort, I think, in trying to present ourselves, is in place. We've been able to get on applications and tools to move from Excel, from certain things into Sage, to move from some worksheets and documents into Zoho CRM. So all of this has helped us, and the investment has come in to help Accelerators. Now, the minute you bring in an investor, and ours is a convertible note, that can be translated into equity after meeting certain targets and milestones. When you bring into somebody else, the reality is you're bringing somebody else who has power and influence on how you now run the business. And so you have to now learn stakeholder management. So I have a new relationship to manage who has influence and can also close the tap or keep the tap flowing. Either way, I have my vision and I must hold on to it and keep going. And as I'm reporting and giving results, they also have great recommendations and support me with technical assistance in areas where I have gaps to solve problems as I'm going along. But you have a stakeholder to manage. And so you must remember that you asked for this. You brought in the investor. It is a partnership, but that partnership requires effort. In the beginning, even as you're discussing and negotiating, our investment cycle took 9 months, the due diligence. You already know that, is this an investor who, first of all, we share certain values around the business, what I'm trying to do, do they understand it? In terms of what they're asking and what I need to deliver, can I do it? Can I honestly do it? And then thirdly, can we get into a relationship where we can actually discuss when we have problems and not have now arbitration and legal lawyers coming forward? You really have to see how that starts in the beginning, because that describes the relationship you're going to go in when the ink dries and you sign the agreement. This capital has been a fantastic partner for Zanga African Metrics. I went through the accelerator, so I had the relationship and I understood. From the beginning, they don't compromise on what they expect. They understand what they've come to accelerate. So there's certain criteria I already had to meet in the accelerator, and even now coming in, they were clear about that. And so you have to continue to build your relationship with the investor, but you also have to understand they have terms and they have also somebody that they report to. So how I've worked with them has been to continuously engage and report and create a system following some of their guidelines that I've had to incorporate in the business. But I've stayed firm on whatever their expectations are and their reporting cycles and requirements. Let them be from our tools so that we don't shift and create a business that is delivering for WCAP. I must remain the CEO. I must remain holding the vision. But I must understand I have an important stakeholder who requires, and I invited certain returns, and I committed to delivering them. So it's navigating the relationship. We have a good relationship, but I'm not ignorant to the fact that they're not necessarily a friend in this relationship. It's about business, nothing personal. We're here to deliver so that both can get the returns. And so you really have to think about what you're doing when you're bringing an investor in the business, and also understand, is it debt you need or equity? Because now I'm becoming more educated about instruments. And in our context, some of these instruments are not easy to come by, because I went to the bank first. Nobody was, it's very difficult at those interest rates. I was thinking, how am I going to manage this? And pay back these interest rates and still succeed. The revenue authority, you have to juggle all these things and still at the end of the day be compliant, deliver the targets, and support the team to continue to see the vision, because they're seeing what's happening on the ground, the problems we're solving. You've got to keep motivating them. And then you've got to keep letting the investors see the indicators that help them be reassured that even though we're not quite seeing what we wanted, we're going to get there.
You're on the right path.
Yes.
So, yeah. I noticed that sometimes people are looking for investor like a patch for a bleeding problem, but like you described it, am I gonna go there anywhere? This is just gonna get me there faster.
Yes.
It's very important mindset that I look for, in people. So thank you for mentioning it. And I also like that important fact: when you invite an investor, you lose a little bit of your freedom, because you sign up to hit certain targets, and deviating from the road from those targets could be difficult. Like deviating from the road or how you get there, do whatever you must. But now you have an important partner that has both of their own, so it's not just their money they are investing. So I feel like these are important factors that a lot of people forget about when they are asking about money and for investors and so on. So thank you for mentioning it. I was also wondering, what is like the toughest thing to explain to your future clients? Because you said the go-to-market strategy in the beginning, you had to create it. That the life cycle of like a sales life cycle is that they're in place. So you have to know and you have to learn when to sell and when not to sell, and also managing the customers in the end. What should I pay you for after you give me the assessment? Kind of thing. I bet that's the common question you might get. So how do you persuade, let's say, bank from Nigeria to send their employees to you?
So interesting because we're currently negotiating with a bank in Nigeria they were referred to us.
Okay, a disclaimer: I did not know. It was just a lucky guess.
We have provided services to Nigerian banks as clients. So, very interesting question. So, this is a real question. So, remember, I think persuading clients is about understanding if I purchase the Zanga products, is it going to solve my problem? So, we start by understanding what is the problem? And are we the best solution for you to solve it? And so what we have been working on is understanding our lane and the problem we solve. So when we look at organizations are looking at having teams that are fit for purpose for the role. And so in essence, what we do at Zanga is we help them identify, as in select, develop, and retain the people in the business to deliver the results the business needs. So to select, we look at the criteria that is effective from a leadership and management perspective. To now filter who should come in and who should maybe not come in now. Second, to develop. Once they're in, nobody is perfect. Where are their strengths and where are their areas for development? What is the benchmark and the baseline you now have to get them future fit? And then when we talk about retain, what are you doing in terms of evolving them to actually move to the next level so that they stay with you because they see those opportunities? There's something in management called Peter's Principle. It's a known management principle that says what got you here won't get you there. And so at any given point in time, everybody gets promoted into their level of incompetence. We talked earlier, you're a new father. Congratulations. You've just been promoted into a new level of incompetence, right? But it will become conscious competence as you now learn this mindset and the skill set of parenting, right? It's the same in organizations. People get promoted into positions faster from a technical perspective than they have developed management and leadership skills. So we actually help organizations solve the problem of getting that person ready to actually be effective in that role. Now, why assessments? So we understand that is the challenge, helping people be ready for the role to actually deliver the results. Our tool then says, how do we measure that readiness? How do we know and use that data? And that's why the power of the data in the tool is important, because then you can make decisions on what to do. And so what we found is that generally, even in small, large businesses, the data points that help organizations make decisions when it comes to people are in different places and fragmented. How can we give them a tool that actually helps you have information about the competencies in one place? How does it help you then use that data to understand and interpret what you need to do to develop the people? And then how do you use that data to understand who's ready for succession? So we use the data behind the tool that we collect from the people to help organizations make decisions so that the development of the people matches the business ambition and the competencies they need to deliver it. And so trying to get clients is just about saying, we are this type of orange. And if you are trying to eat an orange, consider us. We do this effectively in high context cultures. And so I think as long as I continue to be clear about what the challenge organizations are facing is, and continue to listen to them when they give us feedback, we're getting feedback to understand that, yes, we're helping them filter in terms of who should be coming in terms of development. Have we got feedback to say this person went through our program and based on the data we provided has now improved in their ability to own their results and deliver results from the business? The businesses are telling us yes. And so that is how I'm now using those testimonials to come back and not say, Nankhonde says if you use Zanga, you will get this results. You'll have effective leaders. I can now say this bank, this telco, this manufacturing firm, this government can tell you what happened for them. We were able to support them to deliver their results. And so that's why I feel we're the back end to the brains that actually deliver Africa's economy.
Yeah. And now I understand also the long life cycle, because before you actually do the work and the mindset change or the skills upgrade of the employees, it takes some time, right? So before you have that like telco coming, like Zanga helped us so much, it might take a year, because in a year they will see the result. So that has to be that I guess largest challenge in the cash flow business, as you also mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so our sales cycle has to continuously be looking at what clients we bringing in and new existing business and new business. What I've really learned is the value of the existing business and the amount of time it takes to get new the next level of services and contract from the same customer versus the effort it takes to bring in a new customer. And so we're still tweaking and balancing that right. But retention of customer and the metrics that I've had to learn, customer acquisition costs, customer lifetime value, our sales cycle, our conversion rates, again, I myself am on a leadership journey of Zanga. What Zanga does for others, we're doing internally.
And are you still fundraising, or perhaps, where can people go to join your journey, become your client, become your investor, become your friend?
Excellent.
Where can they find you?
You can find us on our website, www.zangametrics.com. We're on LinkedIn. And you can also contact me directly, Nankhonde at zangametrics.com. So we are at the moment looking to, you never stop fundraising, right? Because once you've kind of had that investment that has accelerated you, you now see the scale and opportunity. So our fundraising came in to do three things: help us develop our platform, market expansion, and operational efficiency. I need to achieve those targets that was set and agreed with the investors before I now move into the next level of scale. So we're already in Zambia and 5 other African markets through our coach certification program. So previously, where we were doing B2B, which is our business model, now we actually have certified coaches who are being accredited to have the license rights to our tools and using them in their markets. That's how we've entered other markets, through the coaching professionals, established coaching firms, and HR practitioners who have gone through our certification training program and are now our clients. So we're doing B2B through the coaching and HR practitioners, but we're also doing direct delivery of services. Our scale is built on these coaches we're certifying who are now using our tools across Africa, and also then enabling us to move beyond Africa, because high context cultures are also in the Middle East and Asia. Our market expansion is over this phase to enter the Middle East and then Asia. And we've had that experience. We were approached by a client in Japan, and we were also looking at a client in North America who also approached us to support the countries where they're high context cultures where they're working with. And so right now, reach us on the website, my LinkedIn, Zanga's LinkedIn, and also me directly, Nankhonde at zangametrics.com. Look out for major events. We have been accredited by the International Coaching Federation, so coaches who train and certify with us and have the license rights to the software to use our platform and our tools get their professional development units applicable to their credentials. This year, we're also launching our first big data report. For the first time, Africa will measure itself. We are going to translate what human currency is as capital, because we're seeing human capital as a currency that is exchanged. But we've been measured by Western tools. For the first time, we are now bringing the value of all the data we've collected and producing our first big data report. And the big data report is going to speak to the patterns and trends of leadership development on the continent and the competencies. What are we learning about the differences and capabilities of a manager in Rwanda versus South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire versus Zambia? For the first time, you're going to hear it from the continent, and you're going to have it on the platform shared with what we're being told by others, which we celebrate and I use, other big data publishers about what's going on the continent. I read the reports. I love the McKinseys, the PwCs, the Gartners, the Gallups. Welcome. Zanga is now joining to say, what if Africa measured itself? What if we put the metric to human capital as currency? Our big data report is going to give you that information for the first time. It's bold, it's courageous to step up to some of these giants and say, hey, look over here. We're doing something. And we're credible, and we have been recognized for what we have done, receiving awards as well, internationally and locally. So I'm excited. Get in touch. Invest in us. We continue the conversation. WCAP also understands that we can be looking at a future partner to come in. The exit for me is in 5 to 7 years. I'm building this business for merger and acquisition. I don't intend to be a perpetual CEO. I know how far I can take it. I understand how far it can go beyond how far I can take it. And I believe that's going to be within the tool and suite of a larger corporation that then acquires or merges with us. So invest in us, come work for us. We have a philosophy and culture that is vibrant, interesting, and exciting, but also use our services as clients. We can help, we deliver impact. So don't just be attracted to us because we're African, we're pioneering, we're doing things. Let's help you hit your bottom line and help you develop the people that are going to deliver your results. So as clients, you know where to find us. We've delivered results across Africa. We're here in Zambia, but we have a global team, a hybrid team. Our dev team is in Cape Town. Our business psychologists are in Tanzania. The core operations is in Zambia. We are Pan-African, and we have great partners already working with us. And so join us.
Thank you, Nankhonde. And I also love that you maybe not intentionally mentioned that you guys are fighting stereotypes about African education, right? Because let's face it, if I say to somebody I am investing in African business, they're like, oh, it's very risky, they're not very well educated and whatnot. So now we're gonna actually have the big data back there that is not true. So
Yes.
thank you for that as well. And thank you for your energy that you brought to this podcast. And I can see through the screen, through 6,000 kilometers away, or how many kilometers that is, that you love what you're doing. And I cannot wait to be part of your journey, at least on LinkedIn or perhaps some way else. So thank you very much for joining us and for telling us about high context cultures and how Zanga is actually changing the HR market in Global South.
Thank you, Martin. I love what you're doing at Beyond the Pivot. We appreciate this platform for giving the voices to tell the practical side of the entrepreneurial journey. This is not just about bringing out the things we've learned, but it's also, I hope, inspiring and contributing to others who have not started the journey and are thinking about it to say, come on board. Don't make the same mistakes we made. Beyond the Pivot is a platform that I feel I value. I listened to myself when I was introduced to it because I also learn wherever I am, even having raised money. I'm learning from what you're sharing through your guests. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad it's working. Now we finally met our 1 subscriber.
Yes.
So thank you very much. And take care, everybody.